Ladies, gentlemen, and travelers of all ages, you're progressing through Last Epoch. You're either done or mostly done with the campaign. The build that you've been putting together, either from following other people's build guides online, or just the build that you've been putting together yourself from your own mind. And as you are now progressing through into the later game stages, where you're getting into monoliths and things like that, you have a whole new avenue to power increase on your character, which is uniques. Specifically, you have access to uniques quite early on, honestly, but for the most part, early you are sort of entirely beholden to massive RNG. Whether you get the unique to drop in the first place, then whatever it is, when it does drop, and there's the ever-exciting Rune of Ascendancy that occasionally drops, which lets you create uniques for a specific slot, and that is also part of what we're talking about today. Because today what we're talking about is target farming for specific uniques, how they generally work as a concept as a piece of gear, and how you can turn uniques into legendaries in the late game and the best ways to do so. Starting off then, I quite like the idea of Rune of Ascendancy as a starting point. This drops at random as a crafting item, but it is used through crafting to turn an item into any unique of the same slot. The base item that you start with doesn't really matter outside of the slot. If you use it on a sword, you'll get a unique sword. Same with boots, as simple as that. So if you know that you are aiming for a unique chest piece, for example, that is a great place to start by using this rune. Just use a Rune of Ascendancy on a chest piece, and you have a chance of rolling the thing that you're after. That said, these runes are a relatively limited resource. You won't get them all the time, but you will definitely find a few across your journey. They just aren't all that plentiful to be the be-all end-all of target farming or anything like that, which is where Monoliths of Fate come into play. These will be your main mid-game farming spot for different uniques and set pieces of equipment, with each timeline within the monolith being best for different items, as each one can specifically spawn with echoes that have uniques or set items as the reward within their specific slots. These areas being the Fall of the Outcasts for bows and quivers, the Stolen Lance for wands, scepters, catalysts, and staffs for all the spellcasters out there, the Black Sun for helmets and shields, Blood, Frost, and Death for chest armor specifically, Ending the Storm for gloves, Fall of the Empire for belts, Reign of Dragons for swords, axes, daggers, mace, and spears for the melee users, the Last Ruin for relics, the Age of Winter for rings and amulets, and then Spirits of Fire for boots. Each of these timelines has plentiful specific target farming opportunities for those various slots, both as uniques or even as rares or exalted, occasionally popping up on echoes within the timeline too. Completing one of these echoes that have these set as a reward within the monolith will grant you with one of these at random from the reward chest at the end of the echo, with empowered monoliths and higher corruption ratings giving them a higher chance of rolling with legendary potential and higher legendary potential as well, which we will be talking about in a moment. That said, there are some uniques that are also locked to other locations within the game, such as ones that are locked behind specific dungeon bosses or arena champions as well, and so it's important to be aware of what you're looking for in particular and where to find it. So the website Last Epoch Tools is incredible to use as a guide for this type of thing, as that covers every single item you could conceive of within the game. Now normally you cannot craft with uniques as they have zero forging potential, but there are some exceptions to this. When you first reach the beginning of the endgame around level 50 to 70 or 80, your goal is to get the base uniques that you want for your build, just to get the effects that you are looking for from the uniques in the first place to make your build actually function correctly. Then the next step of moving further in power up the endgame is finding those same uniques again, but with good rolls on the stats on the affixes that spawn on them naturally. Then there is the third, final step, which is good stat rolls on the right unique, and also legendary potential as a stat as well. You can roll anywhere from 0 to 4 legendary potential on a unique, with 4 being incredibly rare on most items. You'll probably rarely if ever see one that has 4 legendary potential, especially on a unique that you actually want to use yourself, and what this directly translates to is legendary crafting, which is done by taking an exalted item or a purple. You can see them being purple when you drop them, when you see them in your inventory, items that drop in endgame content. You smush those together with a unique, and the resulting item is called a legendary. Legendary potential is the amount of affixes that the unique item will gain from the exalted item, with 4 legendary potential meaning it will take all 4 of the affixes at their current values. So essentially the end goal is for all of your uniques to turn into legendaries with high roll base stats and also high rolled solid affixes from the exalted items that you smush into them as well. Maybe even experimental affixes if those are particularly good for you. More often than not, you will only really be working with 1 or 2 legendary potential on your uniques though, even relatively late game, as it's just far more common to actually have drop. And when it's those low numbers, it's a bit more of a slot machine type of thing, as you could not at all get the affix that you're after from the exalted item and basically just brick that unique and have to start again, meaning that you will have to just start from the beginning of the process again to reach your ideal goals. All in all, this system exists as a way of giving you incredible power in the deep end game if you accomplish your goals, if you really farm, if you really grind it out. Not as a prerequisite to do the content in the first place though. A fully kitted out perfect legendary set of gear on a good build would make you way stronger stronger than the average player by a mile, but the average player should also still be strong enough to actually get through pretty much everything the game has to offer, at least until super high corruption level monoliths later in the game. And so this is more of a long-term goal to strive towards one step at a time than something to stress about not having it perfect as soon as physically possible. As for farming exalted items then, to turn uniques into legendaries, again your best bet generally speaking is actually monoliths, especially as there are quite a few echoes that give you guaranteed exalted gear at the end of them as well. And when they do, they drop a handful of pieces of exalted gear at the same time, which gives you some options to actually work with relatively quickly as far as all this is concerned. Then past that, there is one more thing that I really want to talk about here, which is factions. You do have to get quite late in the campaign to actually unlock factions. You need to do this in Chapter 9, and a lot of people stop before Chapter 9 and jump onto the monoliths, which I think is definitely a mistake, especially this time around because of the faction system. You can either join the Circle of Fortune, which will give you prophecies that you can complete, or bonus chances at the rare gear that you could actually be searching for, so things like unique target farming as well do apply to the Circle of Fortune, even though it's less targeted and more just higher chances. Then you've also got the Merchants Guild, which is the other faction that you can join, and using this, you have access to the trade market, which you can use to literally buy any item you could conceive of in the game, though you do have to be a certain level within the actual faction system to be able to interact with everything. That said, even as low as level 3 with the faction, you can get just generic unique items that don't have legendary potential. At level 4, you can get idols, which can be incredibly useful for your build, enabling you to do things that you simply wouldn't have been able to do without this, because some things are quite hard to have drop in this game, and if you're struggling to have them drop, why not make use of other people's drop chance, use the favor that you get just for killing enemies while being a part of the faction, along with gold, which you'll get pretty naturally as well, sell the good items that you get that aren't for your class, buy the good items that you want for your class. I just think that the Merchants Guild is probably pretty underrated for the early section here, especially when you're first getting going, as it can help you put together the very simple skeleton of the build that you want to make a lot easier than you otherwise would be able to then. So to really sum things up there, your true endgame goal are legendary items. Legendaries are crafted from the combination of a unique item with legendary potential and then an exalted item with the stats that you want to move onto the unique. Unique and exalted items are generally best farmed from monoliths, with each timeline being tied to a specific item type or a group of item types as far as farming probability, which we did go over the full list of earlier, but that list really is important to just be aware of long term. Short term, your goal is to just get the right uniques in the first place, then your goal is to upgrade them to be better stat versions of the same uniques, then you want to create legendaries with them and eventually create perfect legendaries with exact perfect affixes all around. The journey to get from step 1 to the final step there is quite long from start to finish, but as far as the enjoyment of Last Epoch, a lot of it comes from the journey itself. After all, once you have reached a state of unstoppable power, what is there truly left to do? Oh right, get even more powerful, because it's just fun to stomp your way through the endgame here. That just about does it for today then, everyone. Just a discussion about endgame gear and uniques within the game, how to get uniques in general, how to get the specific uniques that you are looking for, and how to turn those uniques into the perfect set of endgame gear within the game. Of course, there are other goals to consider along the way too, but few things are exciting in a game like this as seeing those beautiful, perfect, shiny items dropping along the way. Nothing is more exciting. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.